When a person is experiencing depression, it's common for them to have faulty beliefs and assumptions about themselves, other people, and the world more generally. In today's video, I'm going to be describing 13 depression-promoting beliefs and assumptions and what you can do about them. Hi everyone. There are a lot of factors that can contribute to a person developing depression. And one of the most significant factors relates to faulty assumptions about ourselves, other people, and the world more generally. In today's video, we're going to be talking about 13 common depression-causing beliefs and assumptions. But before I get into that, just a couple of disclaimers to go over. I'm a registered psychologist in the province of British Columbia, Canada, and this video is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute or replacement for advice from your doctor or mental health professional. So with those things out of the way, let's start talking about faulty assumptions and beliefs in depression. Now the thing is, over the course of our lives, we all learn principles and rules about how the world works. And these become assumptions that drive how we feel and what we do. These underlying beliefs and assumptions serve as a bit of mental shorthand to help us organize and understand the world. And for the most part, this isn't a problem. But when a person is experiencing depression, there are a number of faulty beliefs and assumptions that can fuel the depression cycle. Now, over 50 years ago, psychologist Albert Ellis began to identify some of these common underlying beliefs and assumptions that can contribute to depression. These are nothing new, but unfortunately, these faulty beliefs and assumptions continue to stand the test of time. Now, the thing about these faulty beliefs and assumptions is that they tend to be implicit, often occurring outside of our conscious, forefront of our mind awareness. So as I'm discussing some of these negative beliefs and assumptions, you might think to yourself, that's silly, I don't believe that at all, I know it's not true. But the point isn't to think about these beliefs and assumptions as, do I believe these things to actually be true? But it's more about, do I act as though I believe in these things? Are my emotional reactions consistent as though I believe these things? So with that introduction, here are 13 common faulty beliefs and assumptions that you may have never thought of that may be contributing to depression. Now, I've presented these in previous videos before, sort of independently, but I thought it would be helpful to put them all together in one video. So I hope you find it helpful and informative. So the first common faulty assumption I want to talk about is the idea that everything I do must be absolutely perfect, otherwise I'm a failure. This belief is at the core of perfectionism. And there tends to be a high degree of societal pressure to strive for perfection, which tends to underlie this belief. The problem with this idea is that nobody's perfect, and nobody does everything perfectly. In fact, pretty much everything we ever do has some degree of imperfection to it. But if you hold the belief that everything needs to be perfect, or you need to be perfect in order to feel good about yourself, in order to not be a failure, what can end up happening is that you'll never be satisfied with anything you do. There's no success. There are no accomplishments, only failures, and I could have done better. The other problem with this belief is that it often causes people to avoid trying new things and avoid stepping out of their comfort zone, because inherent in learning something new is making mistakes. So I might stay in an unfulfilling job or career because I know it well and I do it well, even though I don't really enjoy it. I may not take up any new hobbies like skiing because I might fall a lot. I won't try to learn how to play a musical instrument because it won't sound very good when I first start. And if I feel like I always need to be perfect, making mistakes while learning to do something new, will be too intolerable. And as a result, my world and my life will remain small and constricted because I can never branch out to do anything new. Now, the second faulty belief and assumption I want to talk about is the idea that life is fair. Now, this is sometimes referred to as the just world hypothesis. And at its core, assumes that life and the world is fair and just. People who work hard will succeed, while people who are lazy will not succeed. If I'm nice and caring to other people, they will be nice and caring to me. People will evaluate me based on my character and performance, not where I come from or what I look like. The problem with this just world hypothesis is that it's simply not true, despite the fact that I think we all wish it was true. I think we all wish that the world was fair and just, but that's simply not the case. So if you hold this belief that life is fair or that good things happen to good people, think about the implications of what that means when bad things happen. If I hold the belief that life is fair and something bad happens to me, what does that mean? Well, it must mean that I did something wrong in order for the bad thing to have happened. It must be that I'm being punished for something. So whenever anything bad happens to me, this may drive feelings of guilt because I must have done something terrible to deserve this bad thing that's happening. The key point behind this is that no one ever said that life was fair or just. So a big part of this is accepting that the world is not always fair. And that when bad things happen, it's not necessarily punishment for something I've done wrong. It's just that sometimes bad things happen, and that's the way it is. It's not fair or unfair, it just is. Now, a third common depression assumption is that I am only worthwhile as long as I'm doing something for someone else. Now, this is a big one for mothers who always feel like they need to constantly be taking care of other people, putting the needs and wants of others ahead of themselves because that is what they're supposed to be doing. Now, while the notion of serving and caring for other people is not in and of itself bad, the problem becomes when you constantly put the needs of other people ahead of you, when you constantly sacrifice yourself for the good of other people. If you've ever felt guilty or anxious whenever you treat yourself or take time out for you, this faulty assumption may be playing a role in that. People who hold this belief always seem to prioritize the needs and wants of other people and place themselves at the back of the line. And this is a recipe for depression. The key here is to remind yourself that you're important as well, and that taking care of yourself is not some sort of selfish indulgence or luxury, but that it's a necessity. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're eventually going to burn out and drain your fuel tank, which means you won't have anything left to take care of other people. And if I burn myself out and I'm not able to help people the way I used to, this will likely lead to me feeling even worse about myself because now I'm not taking care of people the way I should be. And this just leads to even more depression. Is this idea and the notion that anger is bad. If you think about anger being bad, we often think about certain emotions that on a societal or cultural level, we identify as being good emotions versus bad emotions. Now, good emotions are things like happiness and joy, contentment, and being at peace. Whereas bad emotions, are things like sadness, guilt, fear, anger. Many of us are taught to suppress or ignore anger, viewing it as bad, irrational, destructive. As a result, we try to bottle up or deny feelings of anger, which is rarely successful and often leads to more feelings of resentment and even stronger anger. The key is that anger, in and of itself, is not bad. Anger is normal. It's a healthy human emotion. The purpose of anger is that it helps us recognize when someone is doing something to cause harm to me or someone I care about, or when someone is crossing my personal boundaries. And when I feel angry, it helps activate me to engage and address the problematic behavior through things like saying no or standing up for myself. The idea is anger pushes me to take action to stop the harmful behavior of the other person. So when you view it that way, anger isn't bad, but rather a necessary emotion to protect ourselves and the people that we care about. Anger only becomes problematic if it's expressed in violent or harmful ways, either verbally or physically. But verbal or physical aggression is not the only way to express anger. And so rather than seeing anger as bad and something to be ignored or suppressed, the focus should be more on appropriate and productive ways of expressing the anger. So things like being assertive, being able to say no, being able to stand up for yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, people often have a view or perception that they must always be at 100% peak efficiency and performance. Now, this is often promoted in modern society where you'll regularly hear things like, you always need to give 100%. But even 100% isn't enough anymore. You now need to give 110%. Things like, no days off, I'll sleep when I'm dead. If you're not going to give it your all, then there's no point in doing it. Now, while all of these types of thoughts might sound good on the surface and look good on t-shirts, holding this type of belief is just a recipe for depression. Suppose I've established some personal best. Maybe it's the fastest I've ever run a certain distance, or the best mark I've ever gotten in a course. If I hold the belief that I must always be at peak efficiency and performance, what that means is that I always have to reach or surpass that personal best. I can never have a slower running day. I can never have a lower mark in a course, as that means that I'm not functioning at 100% efficiency and performance. And if I'm not functioning at 100% efficiency and performance, I'm failing. It's a disaster. And I always have to push myself to try harder and continue to achieve more and more, which is simply not possible. So this is one of those beliefs and assumptions that's cloaked in seemingly noble and virtuous package, but it's really just a destructive and harmful, it's a destructive and harmful view to hold. Now, another common faulty belief is that it's easier to avoid life's problems than to face them directly. Now, this is commonly seen in situations where a person's also experiencing anxiety in addition to depression. Problems in and of themselves can be anxiety provoking, given that the solution to problems is usually not readily apparent. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a problem. It would just be a series of steps I need to do that I know I need to do. It wouldn't be problematic. But since I don't know exactly what I need to do to solve the problem, it can create all sorts of anxiety and stress about doing the wrong thing or making the wrong decision. Now, this is one of those beliefs where you might instantly say, look, I know, I don't believe this. I know it's not true. But ask yourself, do you behave like this belief is true? Think back over the last few weeks or months. Have there been any problems that you put off dealing with or procrastinated to address? Have there been any challenges that you've been faced with in which you said, let me think about that a little bit more, or I'll get to it later, and you took a while to actually get back to it? The big problem with holding this belief and avoiding dealing with problems is that what tends to happen is that problems, when we don't deal with them, tend to get bigger. Have you ever noticed that? Have you ever noticed what happens with problems that you're not dealing with? Do they ever go away on their own? Do they ever just kind of resolve spontaneously with you not having to do anything about it? Now, some might, but you've probably also noticed that most problems that you don't deal with tend to mushroom and get bigger and bigger and bigger, which makes them even more challenging and even more stressful. The temptation then is to avoid dealing with the problem because now it's gotten so big and scary to even think about. But that just makes things even worse. So with this belief, it's important to pay attention to your behavior rather than just simply dismissing it as something you may not consciously believe or consciously tell yourself. The next belief is one that a lot of people struggle with. It's the notion that it is unbearable to me when life is not the way I would like it to be. It's almost as if there is a perfect, ideal life that you're striving for. And once you achieve that life, then everything will be fine. Once I get that job promotion, once I finally get into that long-term relationship I've been looking for, once I'm able to buy a house, once I'm able to lose those 15 pounds, once that loved one is feeling better, then I'll be able to relax and be happy and content. Now, while it's certainly the case that a person might feel better once they've achieved their various life goals, do you think that they can then go on to live a life of complete contentment and peace? Not really. By holding on to the assumption that life is unbearable when it's not going the way I would like it to be, I'm constantly chasing a mirage of some idealized utopian life that simply doesn't exist. Once I've accomplished all of those goals, once all of those problems have resolved, there are going to be new problems and there are going to be new goals that arise. I'll never be satiated. I'll never be satisfied. I'll never achieve enough because underlying this belief is a view that everything in my life has to be going well in order for me to be happy. And has that ever been the case for you? Do you think it's possible for everything in life to be going well at the same time and for that to be sustainable? Life has its ups and downs. And the problem with this belief is that it promotes a myth that life can be entirely ups, which is simply not true. So the idea is to allow and expect and accept that there's going to be a certain amount of upheavals, setbacks, and disappointments in life, rather than setting up some sort of imaginary, perfect, and unrealistic view of what life has to look like in order for me to feel happy. The next belief is often associated in situations in which a person doesn't feel like they have much control in their life, or that they don't have much agency to change things in their life. It's the assumption that I need someone stronger or more capable or more powerful than myself to rely on. I can't do it myself. I'm not capable, and therefore I need someone else to help me. Now, the thing is, we can all use help at times. So the idea here isn't to say that I can accomplish everything myself without needing anyone else's help. But if I hold the belief that I always need someone else to rely on, it makes me helpless because I need someone else always around to take responsibility for me. Now think about the implications of this. If I'm in a relationship and I believe that I need my partner and have to rely on them 100%, what this means is that I can't take responsibility for any aspect of the relationship, or I might not be able to assert myself or express what I want because maybe my partner won't be happy and will leave me, and then who will take care of me? So it's important to think about how many things in your life are you truly incapable of managing? Are there things that you can do? Are there things that you have accomplished? In the relationship example, it's important to recognize that I was able to live my life and manage my life before I ever met my partner. And so what that demonstrates is that I'm capable of doing some things on my own. One common faulty assumption about relationships is that if others disagree with me, then I must be wrong. For people experiencing symptoms of depression, they can often experience a lack of confidence or a lack of belief in themselves. Alternatively, low self-esteem and lacking confidence can contribute to feelings of depression as well. So you can probably see how holding this belief and assumption can contribute to depression. One way of knowing if you tend to hold this belief is to think about, do you often wait to hear what other people think before you express your view about a particular topic? If you're in a meeting, for example, at work, do you wait to hear what other people are saying in order to get a sense of what the general consensus is before you'll share your opinion? People often do this because they're concerned that if they have an opinion that differs from what other people think, then they must be wrong, and it would be embarrassing if they expressed an incorrect opinion in front of other people. Underlying this faulty assumption is that my opinions are always wrong, or that I shouldn't have a right to an opinion that might differ from other people. But think about this. Is this actually the case? Think about where our world and society would be if people didn't have differing opinions, or if people didn't think about situations from different perspectives. Now, this also isn't to say that everything I believe is always right, or that if other people disagree with me, then they must always be wrong. Rather, this is more about having a healthy respect for your own attitudes and opinions, and recognizing that it's okay, and often a good thing, to express what you think, even if it differs from what others think. Because this can allow for further dialogue and discussion, allowing other people to think differently about their positions, and allowing you to potentially reconsider your opinion. So it's not necessarily assuming that any one person knows the right answer, but being willing to express your opinion and listen to other people's opinions. Another common faulty assumption and belief is that the way to be appreciated and accepted by other people is to constantly give and give. This is the idea that people will like me as long as I'm doing something for them. But you can probably recognize the problem or difficulty underlying this belief. By holding this belief that people will appreciate me only as long as I'm doing something for them, the subtle message is that me, in and of myself, I'm not worthy of appreciation and acceptance. It's only what I do for people that causes them to like and accept me. And that if I didn't do these things to serve them, they wouldn't want anything to do with me. It underlies a belief that maybe I'm not worthy of love, or that maybe I'm inherently unlovable for who I am, and the only way to get people to love and care about me is for me to do things for them. One way to know whether or not you hold this belief and assumption is to ask yourself, are you the one that always tends to give more in your relationships? Do you find that many of your relationships aren't reciprocal? The paradox with all of this is that excessive giving and unbalanced relationships can often cause the other person to lose respect for you, particularly if that person is looking for someone to be an equal partner in the relationship. Healthy relationships have a certain amount of give and take. And if all you're doing is giving and all the other person is doing is taking, that's not a recipe for a fulfilling or sustainable relationship. So the idea here is to respect yourself as much as you respect other people. And in turn, this will likely deepen the relationship with the other person and promote a more healthy and balanced relationship, which can be fulfilling and rewarding to both parties. Another common myth that can contribute to depression is a belief that I have to do everything I'm asked to do. This relates to the notion that the only way to be accepted by others is to give and give, but in this belief, it's more about responding and reacting to something that someone else is asking you to do. Now, the thing is, being caring, being responsive, and wanting to help someone out, that's not a bad thing. But if you hold the belief that you have to do everything that you're asked to do, then you're relying on other people to determine what you're going to do. And you're relying on other people to not ask you to do anything unreasonable or anything that you don't want to do. So the thing is, if you hold this belief, you don't get to decide that a request is unreasonable. You don't have the right to defend yourself. You don't have the ability to say no. The other person has control of the situation, and you have to do what they want you to do. This takes away your sense of agency, your sense of responsibility and control over your actions, and can contribute to those feelings of helplessness that are often seen in depression. Additionally, people who hold this belief will often feel angry and resentful toward other people who make requests of them, even though they still go along with those requests. They can often feel like they're being used by other people. Now, the interesting thing is, often the other person doesn't know you're actually feeling this way, and that you don't want to do what they're asking, but you do it because you feel that you have to. Now, the other person may not realize this is a problem because you always do what they ask you and probably assume that you're just very agreeable and happy to do so. So this can lead to very unhealthy cycles and patterns in relationships that can contribute to feelings of depression. Another common relationship myth that can fuel depression is the idea that good relationships have no problems. You can think of this as the "they lived happily ever after" myth. You see this often in TV shows and movies where people live in harmony with one another as if they don't have any relationship problems, and that if any relationship problems do arise, they're resolved by the end of the 30-minute TV show, or they get neatly tied up into a little ball by the end of the movie as the couple holds hands walking off into the sunset. They lived happily ever after. Now, one of the assumptions underlying this belief is that if you've found the right partner, if you found the perfect partner for you, you'll never have any problems in your relationships, and that the relationship won't require any work or effort. If there are challenges, however, in the relationship, or if you do have to put effort into maintaining the relationship, it's almost like this is a sign that maybe this might not be the right relationship for you. But it's important to remember that every long-term relationship requires work, effort, and maintenance. There's no such thing as a self-sustaining relationship. You meet someone, fall in love, and never have to think about it again, or never have to work at the relationship again. That doesn't happen. Just because a relationship requires work, or just because you experience occasional conflict with the other person, that doesn't necessarily mean that the relationship is wrong or bad or unhealthy. It may just mean that the relationship is like every other relationship, having its ups and downs. All relationships require caring, nurturing, and effort, and an expectation that there will be problems, but that you'll be able to mutually work through those problems with the other person. Those are kind of the underlying expectations of a healthy relationship. Now, finally, the last myth and assumption is a notion that I have the power to change people. If I care for someone in the right way, if I love them enough, they can become the person they should be, or they can become the person I want them to be. If I provide them with a secure enough relationship, or if I can explain it to them in a way they understand, they'll be able to get things together and make those important changes they need to make in their life. This is rooted in the romanticized idea of love conquers all. But by holding this assumption, it's almost as if I believe that I have enough influence over the other person that will cause them to improve their lives by working harder at school, or giving up drinking, or striving for a better career, or that I can help them save more money or learn to control their temper. Those types of things. Now, often what is underlying this is a tremendous sense of caring and wanting better for the other person. And so it's almost like I'm trying to work harder at the other person's life than they are. The problem is, this doesn't work. You can't work harder at another person's life than they are. Now, I'll sometimes see this with my therapy clients, and it's a sign that things are not going well. If I find myself working harder at therapy than they are, it never works. You see, the thing is, it's hard enough to control my own life and make changes in the areas of my life that I need to change. And so if it's that challenging for me to make changes in my life where I have control over what I do, then you can probably see how impossible it is to think that I could change anyone else simply through the force of my personality or loving efforts. What often ends up happening in situations where you find yourself working harder at the other person's life than they are is that you end up feeling resentful of the other person. You're working hard, you're putting in effort, you're trying to solve their problems, you're expending all of this energy, but the other person hasn't changed at all. And so the unfortunate outcome in many of these situations is resentment, anger, and disappointment towards the other person you care about because you believed that you could change them. So there you have it, the 13 common faulty beliefs and assumptions that contribute to depression. I hope you found this compilation video helpful, and that by being more aware of these beliefs and assumptions that you might hold, you can start challenging and changing some of the ways that you think and behave that might be fueling these assumptions. I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions about any of these assumptions I've talked about, so please leave me some comments and questions in the comments section down below. If you've been enjoying my videos and would like to see more, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell, and you'll be alerted every week when I post a new video. So that's all for today's video. As always, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.